has, in traditional economics, the purpose of prices is not as a motivator. Money is not a motivator as such. The main purpose of pricing is measurement and information. So prices in a market is supposed to encapsulate all the information that's available, and so that you have one price, and that tells you on what basis you can make a decision. Of course, in the real world, prices do not encapsulate all the information that's available, and so you have to get other information in order to help you make decisions. And I think an economic definition of reputation could be the information about people and things that is not encapsulated in the market price about them. And that's something that becomes very interesting when we start talking about online economies or peer production or informal economies, because the big difference between informal economies and formal economies is that the formalization of the market price mechanism is missing. And when that is missing, you have all sorts of problems which relate to totally independent from motivation, but they relate to decision-making processes. How do you select, say, which open source project you want to write for, or what is a better product, when you don't have price as information? You have to find other ways of getting this information. You have to find other ways of deciding where you want to allocate your resources, where you want to spend your time. And of course, it's not as if that is not happening all the time in the real world offline. So reputation is extremely important offline and is always there, simply because price does not, in reality, encapsulate everything that you want to know. Now, the thing is that that reputation, nevertheless, does translate in the real world into prices, into other things, into material goods. You can use your reputation to get a job, to do other things, and when you have a situation such as open source software, which is an area that I've studied a lot, where you start building up reputation, but you do not necessarily have a direct mechanism to earn money directly from the production that you're engaged in, then it's natural to think of reputation as one way of earning a living. In probably the first interview with Linus Torvalds on economics, which I did in 1996, I asked him then how he, writing Linux and giving it away is all very well, but where do you pay for your pizzas? And he said even back then that resume Linux looks pretty good. So even then, reputation was convertible currency, and but it's convertible differently for different people. So when you're Linus Torvalds, when you're the star, you can convert your reputation into money, into jobs, into other things at a pretty good exchange rate. But if you're half as good as him in terms of reputation, you're not going to get half the monetary equivalent. You're going to get a much worse exchange rate. And it's not very different from how things work in the real world. I mean, if I want to convert $100 million into euro and I'm Citibank, I'm going to get a good exchange rate. If I want to take money out at a hotel in Amsterdam, then I'm not going to get a good exchange rate. But what's interesting is that 400 years ago, the exchange rate was much worse. The spread in exchange rates was much worse. If I was the Fuggers or the King of France and I wanted to convert money, I would get a good exchange rate. If I was a peasant, I would probably not be able to convert things at all. And that's probably the situation we are in today right now with reputation online. That the infrastructure, whether it's administrative, financial, or technical, to provide a mechanism for reputation to be used and converted and so on, that infrastructure doesn't really exist. In the offline world, you don't need that infrastructure so much because it exists in informal systems. But once you get online, reputation becomes much more important, it becomes much easier to abuse, and it becomes an issue where infrastructure is much more important. So I'd like to end with a couple of stories about what online reputation is like today and how it would look if it was implemented this way offline. So take the example of John, who runs a restaurant. He's specializing in Moscow cuisine. And some people like this food, other people don't like this food. And people don't like this food for many reasons. Maybe they don't like food at all, maybe they're vegan and they don't like eating the meat that he cooks, maybe they don't like French food. Everyone rates his restaurant, and his restaurant gets a rating as a bad restaurant, even though he makes excellent proposal food, simply because most of the people who rate his food either don't like it for reasons that have got nothing to do with the quality of his food, or don't know anything about it, or have never bothered to try it. That doesn't happen in the real world so much. So this is an example I call the scarlet letter example. It's a reference that Daniel Solov made as well in his position paper, because it's the system of having some centralized or generalized method of coming up with one objective rating for something, in this case John's Restaurant, in the attempt to come up with, this is the reputation of this restaurant. But in the real world, that's not how reputation works. A second example, which relates to portability. Anna hears Professor Feynman give a lecture, and he recommends a book. She goes to the bookshop, and she has to immediately forget the book that Professor Feynman recommended, because she can't remember these things. Instead, she has to ask the bookshop for a book. And the bookshop says, well, you bought Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets and the Trachtenberg Speed System of Mathematics, so you will probably like Deepness in the Sky, because other people who bought those books like this book. Now, that can be useful statistically, but it's not how things work in the real world, and it's not how Anna would normally buy a book. She heard someone she respects tell her about a book on physics, and she wants a book on physics that someone she respects told her about, and that's just not there in the systems that we have today online. And finally, I think you have the systems that we have today are often very easy to abuse in what it's very easy to come up with fake votes, either intentionally or either by mistake or unintentionally, such as the people who don't like French food who will vote against John's Restaurant, but also intentionally, because you can vote for yourself or you can create fake identities. And this does not require formal voting systems. It can simply be in terms of discussion forums on Wikipedia. Wikipedia charmingly calls this sock puppets. Sock puppets are fake identities that vote in favor of one idea or one argument. And this is again a problem of trying to come up with an objective reputation. Now in the real world, you don't have objective reputations. Someone has a reputation for me. I like this person, or I have a good impression of this person. Someone else might have a fairly different impression of this person. And that's something that is quite natural in the real world. That it could be your opinion. I mean, if my view of Keynes is going to be different if I'm a Chicago school economist or if I'm a revolutionary economist. My view of Charles Darwin is going to be different if I believe in that the Bible is the literal truth, or if I don't. So that's how things work in the real world. There is no objectivity in reputation, and systems that try to impose objectivity on opinion, I think, confuse fact and opinion, and that's an important distinction that needs to be made. And online reputation systems mostly today try to treat reputation as a sort of objective fact that needs to be achieved, but reputation is not objective, it is subjective. And that, I think, is an important thing to consider. It also solves a lot of these problems. In a subjective reputation system, like in the real world, people who like Provençal food will know that John's Restaurant is a good restaurant. People who are not interested in French food or meat at all will not like his restaurant, but that doesn't affect the others who are interested in that. You can create all the sock puppets. I can create 1 million sock puppets who will all vote for Rishab as a great speaker, but only those sock puppets will believe that. Nobody else who trusts, unless they trust the sock puppets, nobody's going to believe that. So you can't fake reputation the same way, and that's how it works in the real world. So I think it's important to look at these mechanisms when we are trying to build out an infrastructure online, to look at why it succeeds in the real world and try to build those mechanisms online in a similar way.